This is a favorite topic of our industry. We do welding day in and day out. We have approximately more than 1,000 welders in the yard, and most of you have quite a few welders with you. I just want to touch upon the subject because we keep getting a lot of problems associated with both with welders as well as with the welding. In this presentation, I will just touch about what is WPS, PQR, and qualifications. What and why, or why is of welding qualifications, different types of qualifications, essential requirements of welding, and common issues with welding. Welding qualification types. Welding procedure qualification, development, validation of a procedure. I'm sure every one of you, you have a lot of welders with you. You have a lot of welding procedures. At least some of you have your own company welding procedures. But when we come to DryDock, when you take a job from DryDock, sometimes there's a mismatch. How we can bridge it? Welding performance qualification. Basically, the ability of a welder to do a proper welding. So there are two types of welding qualification. One is the weld as it is. The other one is the performance of the welder. Need for a welding qualification. In a welding, there are many parameters which affects the quality. The parts to be joined, the welding process, and the operator's skill. The purpose of qualification is to demonstrate that welding procedures and the personnel are absolutely controlled and capable of producing an acceptable result. That means a good weld. Hence, these are important tools for assuring quality of a product. We have to ensure that the way in which we do the welding is good, our operator is good, so that we can get a sound weld. Procedure qualification test, as it is not a guarantee that the weld what we make is good. Quality of the weld, upon completion of the weld, we have to do certain inspections to ensure that the weld quality is sound. You can qualify a procedure. Just by qualifying a procedure alone doesn't mean that weld will be good. We have to do certain kind of inspections and testing. However, a qualified welding procedure that will guide the welding process, qualified welder to perform the welding. A qualified welder is required to perform the welding, and the chances of rejection in case of we qualify a procedure will be less. If you qualify a procedure, the rejection rate will be very, very less. Codes and standards. There are various codes and standards stipulate welding qualification, as be boiler and pressure vessel codes, section B31, APA 1104 codes, AWS. I'm sure you are very familiar with these codes. Let us see what are the specific standards addressing welding qualification. I'm talking about procedure qualification. Most of these codes call direct application of the standard. That means it directly tell you what exactly to be done. There are certain other codes have their own qualification requirements, like classification societies. There are various approaches for procedure qualification. Welding procedures are qualified by preparation and testing of standard test pieces, which I will show you later. The qualification test need not be repeated unless the welding procedure specification is changed. Once we qualify a procedure, it can stay with the company for any number of years, unless otherwise the parameters are changed. Some pressure vessel standards and specifications require test plates to be welded at the same time as the vessel seams and subsequently tested. Protection test. This is basically for boilers and pressure vessels. Now let us learn a few standard terms which we are quite familiar. One is WPS, Welding Procedure Specification. It is a document specifying different welding variables with their ranges. This is a guide for making a sound weld and also provides an assurance that when a weld is produced according to the approved WPS, the weldman would meet the required mechanical properties. Once you qualify a procedure and you do the welding properly, it will ensure that there are certain mechanical properties of that weld will meet the requirements. Next one is PQR, procedure qualification record. It is actual record of the welding variables used during qualification of the test coupon. WPS is a guide. PQR is the actual value what we get when we do a test weld. PQR describes the limit of the WPS. Welder Performance Qualification Record, WPQR. It's a record of welder performance test. It indicates the actual test variables as well as the limits of the variables the welder permitted to weld in. Welding procedure specification. Welding procedure specification is a document detailing various parameters. Basically the base metal, the current, the position, the heat treatment requirements. When a production weld is made with these parameters, it is likely to achieve service requirements imposed on the weld. Basically, once we do a weld according to a particular WPS, it will meet the requirements of mechanical properties, corrosion properties, etc. Now, how do we qualify a procedure? A WPS must be proven by carrying out a test weld piece. And testing is to ensure that predicted results are achieved. We write a WPS. A welding engineer can write a WPS. There are actually three approaches for a procedure qualification. First approach, prepare a proposed preliminary WPS. That means the welding engineer of a company, from his experience, he can prepare a WPS. Then he select the parameters. A test piece is done based on these parameters, and mechanical testing is carried out. If the test piece passes this test, then the proposed WPS is converted into a final procedure, welding procedure specification. So initially, the welding engineer, based on his previous experience within the yard or within your company, he can write a WPS, prepare a test piece, do the welding using a good welder, send the test piece for testing. If the passes, good. We'll make that WPS as a final WPS. If the test fails, then the welding engineer can change the parameters, then redo the test again. Based on satisfactory test results, a PQR is made, and this is followed by final or approved WPS. Because PQR is actual record of what we are doing on the test piece. WPS is from the experience he writes. This is the variables, these are the limits. Finally, you do a test, but during the test, we measure the current, we see the actual conditions and record it. We must recall here, PQR is an actual record of variables, and WPS specifies all these variables with the permitted limit. PQR is the actual record of the variables what we do when we do a test. Now let us see there are three types of variables. There are a couple of terms we have to go through. One is essential variables when we do a PQR or a test. These variables, when changed beyond the permitted limits, affect the properties of the weld joint. In a PQR, we have certain variables which are called essential variables. And if you make any changes when you do the welding, if there is a change beyond the limits which is specified in the PQR, then what happens? It affects the properties of the weld joint. Or it's the ability of the welder to deposit a sound weld in case of a performance qualification. A change in essential variable requires requalification. I will show you some sample of essential variables. Examples of essential variables. Carbon steel is not equal to SS, which is in P8. Base melt P numbers, these are not same. Now, non-essential variables. In a PQR, there are some variables which are non-essential. If there is a change in the variables, it doesn't affect the mechanical properties. A change in non-essential variables does not recall a requalification of a test coupon. However, court stipulates that whenever a non-essential variable is changed, a WPS must be rewritten. PQR is actual record of what we are doing at the time of testing. But if there is a change in the non-essential variables, we have to rewrite a WPS. Remember, WPS is basically a guide to make a good weld. It will help the welder, it will help the welding supervisor to execute a proper job. Now let us see. This is a test coupon, but he can see these are This in the case of a procedure qualification. Single V welder from one side. We have done the test coupon with a single V, but this is qualifies for single V from one or from both sides, symmetrical double V, asymmetrical double V, or also for fillet joints. If you qualify your procedure on a single V joint, but this qualifies for all these. Now there are some supplementary essential variable. This is very, very important, especially in conversion projects. The client stipulates there are certain variables which they want to attach to our PQR. These variables come into focus when an impact test is a qualification requirement. Most of our conversion projects, the client always specify impact requirements. In such cases, the variables designated by the codes as supplementary essential variables become a de facto essential variable. Because most of the conversion projects, when we do procedure qualification, there's always a requirement of impact test. So these become a de facto essential variable. Now joint configuration. When we do a test on a 10 mm test piece, it qualifies from a range of 5 to 20. There's a range. Many a times when I see the PQR which is given to us from many of your companies, they do a test and then they forget to specify the range. It's become an issue. You have a range, the code permits from half the thickness to double the thickness. Please ensure that this is clearly written in your PQR and get it signed off. Now let us see what is the second approach of procedure qualification. A company in manufacturing business for quite some time is likely to have conducted several PQR, and they have several PQR in their custody. It is possible to write a new WPS based on the old test which is carried out in the previous years. In DryDocks, you must have seen there's a lot of PQR which we are procedure tests which we have done probably 10 years, 15 years back, we are still using. So this comes, if you see even some of the old logo is there on some of the procedures which is stamped by Classification Society maybe 10 years back. This approach when deployed saves crucial resources for the company. We don't have to do the test, we don't have to do the test coupon again, we don't have to do the test again. So please, if you are doing a procedure qualification today, save it for the future. Based on the procedure qualification, you can make several WPS based on your requirement. Then let us see if there are certain conditions. A new WPS can be approved based on all PQR provided, all essential variables and supplementary essential variables like impact test are within the recorded limits of the qualified PQR. We got to ensure that the new WPS is well within the limits of the test which we have carried out on the approved PQR. We have done it PQR maybe 10 years back. We can write a new procedure based on not on 1 or 2 or 3 PQR. We can combine together. We can make a new WPS, but they have to be within the limits. The concept of pre-qualification is based on the reliability of certain proven procedures as defined in the code or standard, AWS, pre-qualified procedures. And if you look at AWS D1.1, there are quite a lot of pre-qualified procedures available. For many, our ordinary day-to-day use, pre-qualified procedures are acceptable. But in case of conversion projects, unless otherwise the client agrees, we cannot use this. We got to ensure that, okay, all the procedures what we use on conversion projects, especially if you are taking conversion jobs, please ensure that the procedures are approved by the client. In case you are using a pre-qualified procedure, the contractor is required to prepare a WPS documents and to accept the responsibility for the use of it. Now let us see how a typical WPS looks like. It has got the scope, base metal, welding process, filler metal, so on and so forth. This is one of the WPS which is prepared by DryDocks World Dubai. As I said, once you qualify, please, if you are qualifying procedures, ensure that your range is always specified. The positions in which it is qualified is specified. Otherwise, when it comes back to the yard, sometimes Classification Society, even our welding engineer says, sorry, this is not acceptable. You must have done the procedure, but if you fail to document that properly, this creates a lot of problem. This is quite common with many of you when you prepare procedure qualification records. We have to see a few more terms like P number, F number and N number. Basically a lot of confusion. Many cases, everybody have a look at the WPS and PQR, but not very many people are familiar with what is P number. P number is the families of base metal have assigned based on the characteristics, composition, weldability, and properties. You can see base metal steel and steel alloys, it is from P1 to P11, aluminum and its alloys P21 to 25. Just keep in mind, P number is families of base metal. Many a times that column is left unfilled. I've seen quite a few procedures, PQR coming to the yard for approval. P number and group number. Group numbers are assigned within the P number to ferrous base metals which have specified impact test requirements. Again, on your PQR, please ensure that the group number also is mentioned in case of ferrous metal. How do we find out P numbers? We can refer to ASME Boiler and Pressure Vessel Code section 9. Go to the table QW42. This is ASME code. You can see the P number and the group number. Very easy to find. Once you know where to look, you don't have to mug up this one. These information is available with the ASME Pressure Vessel Code book. Open it up, see which P number it belongs to, which group number it belongs to. Do not leave these columns blank in your PQR. Now let's see what is F numbers. F number is grouping of electrodes and welding rods is based on essentially on their usability characteristics. This fundamentally determines the ability of welders to make satisfactory welds with a given filler metal. This grouping does not imply that base metals or filler metals within a group may be indiscriminately substituted for a metal that was used in the qualification test. There should be due consideration to be given for compatibility of the base and filler metals from the standpoint of metallurgical procedures. Again, when we do, unless otherwise you are a welding engineer, you don't have to go too much into it. But if your company is planning to do a procedure qualifications, go through this a little bit detail. Tell your welding engineer to find out what is the P number, what is the group number, what is the F number. Ensure that this is completed. This is again A number. This refers to the chemical analysis of the deposited weld metal. Not very important at the moment for us. Now let us see what are the qualification tests. Qualification tests are intended to demonstrate that welding procedure results in sound weld with acceptable mechanical properties. That means when we do a test, it produces sound weld or sound results. Test need not simulate the actual condition of a given job. Base and filler materials, welding variables, and heat treatment must follow production plans within the specified range. Now, procedure qualification tests again, other variables such as joint geometry or welding precision may not be considered as a qualification variable. They are usually non-essential variables for procedure qualifications. If you are on the production, if you are using vertical weld overhead for procedure, you can do the procedure on downhand using the best welder available. Specimens are to be removed from the sample files for examination and testing. Now let us see, when you do a procedure qualification, what you are trying to do is you are trying to join two pieces of metal. Your production process wants you to do weld in overhead position, vertical, horizontal, but for procedure qualification, we have to prepare a piece and which you use the best welder available with you and do in the most convenient position for you. And the test what we have to do on the piece is tensile test, guided bend test, Charpy notch toughness test, and macros test. And also, in some cases, non-destructive examination. This is a sample of a test piece, and both ends is normally discarded. Then there are two tensile specimen is done. Then there are face bend, root bend, and there are two face bend and two face bend, root bend and two face bends. In case of a pipe, there are two tensiles taken from here. Now you can see mechanical test specimen, how it is produced. You can see this is a weld joint. This is one specimen which is taken, and this is the weld joint. This is how a face and root bend is done. You can see the weld sample is cut from the test piece, and this is put on two pieces and pressed. where you can see the root is here in 2 cases, and in these 2 cases the face is here. This is what exactly happens when they do a test. This is called a plunger type test. This is a plunger, piece is kept on there, pressed down, either with the face at the bottom or a root at the bottom. There are 2 tests each to be carried out. Please note that weld and heat effects zone must be within 180 degree of the bent portion of the specimen. But this will be done by the lab, just for information. This is how we qualify a procedure. These are tensile test specimens. In case of a pipe, you can see how it is taken. And in case of a plate, how this is taken. And the next test, again, as I said, Sharpie impact test, very essential for conversion projects for us. A sample is taken, a notch is produced, which you have seen in the last presentation. And on an impact machine, the test is carried out and values are recorded. And this is a sample PQR. This is basically for information, because a lot of procedures, what do you qualify and bring it to us for approval. We have seen a lot of common mistakes, unfilled columns, reduced ranges. It creates a lot of problem for us as well as for you. If you haven't written the full range, even though you have qualified the procedure, if you haven't written the full range, you can't do it. When the inspector comes for inspection, he'll say, oh, you are not welding within the range which is given to you. So please ensure that when you do qualify a procedure, the parameters are recorded correctly, the ranges are recorded correctly, the P number, the group number, A number, all are filled correctly, so that your production process is smooth. Thank you very much.